Hi guys, I'm Gasha. Welcome to our Coffee Times to talk about horror. And I am extremely excited today because we are here to talk, finally, about Nosferatu.
It's coffee time!
This is going to be a completely spoiler-free review. I have been waiting for this movie since forever, basically since it was announced that Robert Eggers was adapting Nosferatu, and I was so lucky to be able to get a spot in the premiere, so I was able to see it early, which is the 25th of December. That's when I went to watch it. I'm aware that's the official release date, but in the Netherlands where I live, the official release date was the 2nd of January. So I actually got an early access in a way to the movie, and I was really excited. That was my Christmas present. Nosferatu is an American Gothic horror movie that was written and directed by Robert Eggers, and it is a remake of the 1922 movie Nosferatu. The cast of this movie is something that I was really excited about when it was announced. We had Bill Skarsgård, we had Nicholas Hoult, Willem Dafoe. Unfortunately, Anna Taylor-Joy, who was going to play Ellen, had to step out of the project, and so they brought on board Lily Rose Depp. If you've seen any of the other Nosferatu movies, you probably already know that the type of vampire that you're going to encounter in these movies is nothing like the typical vampires that everybody knows. The Nosferatu movies are not movies meant to be scary per se. They are more about the lore and the creepiness and the obsession and the love, and it is centered around the idea of what it is a true vampire. In preparation for this movie, I did rewatch the movies from 1922 and 1979. I first watched the 1922 movie called Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, and this silent movie is a German movie, and this is still so good and so creepy. I would still encourage you guys to check it out if you have never seen it. This is a German expressionist movie, and it tells the story of this young man that wants to secure the sale of a property, but little does he know that the count he's going to visit is going to be obsessed with his wife, and he will end up bringing his own plague to his town. Nosferatu is an unauthorized and unofficial adaptation of the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, and so to avoid problems, they decided to change things in the story as well as names. So instead of Count Dracula, we have Count Orlok that ended up being called Nosferatu. Even though they changed a lot of things to avoid a copyright infringement, they did acknowledge that the story was based on Dracula. Even though they changed some details, Bram Stoker's descendants decided to sue, and actually it was demanded that this movie would be destroyed and burned, but some copies remained, and I am so glad that they did, because I think this is also such a great classic in a movie that would set up like a canvas for a lot of Gothic horror to come afterwards. Then I watched the 1979 Nosferatu the Vampire, which is also a German movie, and this one, fun fact, they released the full-length movie both in English and in German, so you can choose how you watch it. This one served both as a remake from the 1922 silent movie as well as an adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel. What really elevated this movie was Klaus Kinski's portrayal of Nosferatu, as well as the color palette that was used for this movie. It was very well received, it was a commercial success, so it was really good for us horror fans. I really enjoyed how they did the vampire Nosferatu in this one. The look, you know, from this kind of like white, almost translucent shaved skull to the fingernails, but also the teeth. The teeth is something that I really loved about these Nosferatu in comparison to your typical Dracula stories, like your typical vampire stories, because the teeth are not on the outer side, they are basically on the front. They're very easy to see that these are not normal teeth, that these are weird teeth, and I just love them. I thought they looked so cute. And if you see these movies back to back, which is what I did, I watched the 1922, 1979, and 2024 in 2 days. So basically I watched them back to back. It's very interesting because they're all telling the same story and the scenes are kind of the same ones, but you can see how every different director brings something so unique to the character of Nosferatu, and how they are So similar, yet so different at the same time. And now let's deep dive into Nosferatu 2024. In the 1830s, estate agent Thomas Hutter travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok, a prospective client. In his absence, Hutter's new bride, Ellen, is left under the care of their friends Friedrich and Anna Harding. Plagued by horrific visions and an increasing sense of dread, Ellen soon encounters an evil force that's far beyond her control. The story is always the same. We have a young, unexperienced solicitor that is basically sent to Transylvania because Count Orlok wants to buy a house, but he wants to seal the deal in person. But we all know that Count Orlok will see a picture of Ellen and it will remind him of his once lost love, and he will do absolutely anything to get her. I mean, I've always said Dracula is one of the most beautiful love stories ever made. And I know it's not the most healthy type of love. It's obsession, it's toxic, it's almost a demonic possession because Dracula always manipulates everybody. But I also think that it's a beautiful love story. When it comes to the characters, we obviously have Thomas Hutter, which is Jonathan Harker, and he's a solicitor. He's newlywed, very naive, and he travels all the way to Transylvania. I'm pretty sure he's never been out of the country before. He looks like lost, like a deer in the headlights. And I love the way that Nicholas Hoult portrayed this character. I think he was one of the strongest when it comes to the cast in this movie. And you can see how innocent and lost he looks throughout the majority of the film. This actor has definitely become one of my favorites after seeing The Menu. And I also recently watched Your Number 2, and I think he did another remarkable job. Then we have Ellen, and Ellen is basically his wife. And before Thomas departs, she already starts having these nightmares, these weird dreams that are being caused by Orlok and the power that he has over her. She just doesn't know it yet. I have to say, I was really sad that Anna Taylor-Joy had to leave this project because it is not a mystery that I'm in love with Anna Taylor-Joy and I love her as an actress. But I didn't mind so much that they decided to cast Lily Rose Depp. I wanted to give her a chance, you know, and not prejudge her for all the things that I have seen with her. And very interestingly enough, I felt like she did a great job when it came to the portrayal of the visions, the nightmares, the convulsions, the twisting of the body, all of those more physical things. But when she had regular friend-to-friend conversations, I felt like she was not as good, which is interesting. I think she thrives when she has a bigger challenge or something like a scene that is more physically demanding of her. That's when she really comes out of her shell. Then we have to talk about Simon McBurney, who basically plays Renfield in this adaptation. I think they call him Mr. Knox. And he is basically Thomas' boss, and he's the one that sends him to Transylvania, but he's also in a way controlled by Count Orlok. He goes crazy, cuckoo, he keeps saying, you know, blood is life, and we all know the character of Renfield, we all know he goes cuckoo. And I think his portrayal in this movie might have been one of my favorite of all of the Renfields that I have seen. And this actor did such an amazing job. I don't know if many people are going to talk about him in the movie, but he was one of the best bits. Then we have Professor Albin Eberhard from France, and that is basically Van Helsing. This is the name that they gave him in this movie, and he is played by Willem Dafoe. I was really excited. I was waiting for him to come because I think Willem Dafoe always brings so much energy to the screen, and this is a movie that is quite slow, sad, moody kind of film, and I was waiting for him to come and be the light of the party. And you know, he did. His character was a little bit crazy, a little bit cuckoo. He plays here a professor that basically has been kicked out of the medicine field because he started toying with alchemy and the occult, and he is the only one actually that knows what's going on with Ellen for real, and he's the only one that can help them. Now, when it comes to Count Orlok, we all know it's played by the one and only, the fantastic Bill Skarsgård, and I'm not gonna talk too much about the way that it looks because I went into the movie without knowing how he looked, and I think it's the best way to approach this type of films. And I think the director did a really good job to hide him in the shadows for as long as he could, because I think when you have a creature, a vampire, anything that's supposed to be really creepy, the longer you make people wait to see it, the more it kind of starts to creep under your skin. What I will tell you is that it's a very different interpretation of the other Nosferatus that you have seen, and it's perhaps the more realistic in a sense that it looks like somebody that's actually dead, diseased, rotting, dead. You could almost smell him through the screen. And I also know a lot of people are not gonna be happy about the way that he looks because it's very different, but I honestly appreciate when directors decide to do something different, and in my opinion, it worked. The way that he talked throughout the movie, when you would hear the voice, it was almost like it was inside of your head. The sound department did an amazing job, and the way that they decided to do the Count's voice is also so different, but it is so unnerving, and I think it worked really well. But again, I understand why it might not work for a lot of people that go to the movie with certain expectations. The thing is, the original material, you know, Bram Stoker's Dracula, is a compilation of diary entries and letters, and it's all about these characters and their drama in a way. And this movie, I think, does a really good job at explaining those characters in a short amount of time. Even though the movie is long, you have many characters, and this movie is filled with emotions. And for me, it worked. But again, I think a lot of people are expecting a classic vampire, and this is not it, especially if people are not familiar with the other adaptations from 1922 and 1979, and they go to watch this movie thinking they're gonna watch just a typical vampire movie. That might feel disappointed. This is Robert Eggers' fourth feature. He did The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, and those were all successes for me. I loved every single one of them, and I think Robert Eggers has a way to approach his movies that even though he is a young director and he could put all of these modern things in his movies feel old. His movies feel like period pieces, and he's taking you into a journey that feels so real. He makes you believe witches are real. He makes you believe all of these things, and I'm here for the ride. But I think he's a very particular director, and not everybody is going to love his vision. His Nosferatu is very, very different. We do get a couple of interesting jump scares, but the movie centers, of course, on Count Orlok, and that's the one you want to see. And Count Orlok has actually less screen time than you would imagine, but he's always present in the movie. He's always lurking somewhere in the shadows. You can see a huge shadow of Orlok's hand sailing drone-like above the homes of Wisborg, and this is the kind of exclamatory expressionism that Murnau might have loved. Technically and logistically, this movie is a great achievement. The wind, the rain, the darkness seem to do Nosferatu's bidding. It's made with the most modern filmmaking technology, but feels like an artifact from another century. Eggers has always said that for him it was very important that his movies were historically accurate, and you can see it here from the set design, from the costumes. It just feels like this movie was done back in the day. It doesn't feel like a modern movie, and that is not an easy thing to achieve. He's of course using new technology because he has access to it and he uses this to his advantage. But when you see this movie, you think it was done 100 years ago. There are some scenes in this movie that look black and white, but they're not. It's just the masterful manipulation of color and of shadows and light. It is amazing. There are some scenes that take place at night, and when you have a night scene, it's really hard to shoot because you cannot see much. But the way that he presents them, that they almost, these night scenes look like black and white, and they are stunning. I was just mesmerized by the way you could see everything even though you were in the middle of the night, and the color grading really worked for me. For some people, they might say they would have hoped to have more color in this movie, especially if they were fans from the 1971 adaptation, which had beautiful colors. But I think that for Eggers' vision, this color grading made a lot of sense. Let's talk about the horror. So when you watch a vampire movie or a Dracula movie, I don't think you do that for the scare factor, right? I don't think these are the creatures that are supposed to be scary in a way. I think there are many other elements to vampires that are way more interesting to discuss, like morality. And even though this movie does have a couple of jump scares, I think the most unsettling part is just the way that Count Orlok looks and behaves. I think this is such a good example of a good Gothic movie with beautiful scenes, a lot of folklore in it as well, and I think Eggers' vision is very unique, even though the plot is the same in every kind of Dracula slash Count Orlok movie. In his movie, you're going to see elements of vampire mythology that you might have not seen in other movies, because I know Robert Eggers did a lot of research on this character. The vampire he's presenting is more animalistic, more like a regular mammal, and he's presenting his obsession, but he's somebody that is also sick. And I think this is probably the portrayal of Nosferatu where you really feel like this guy is sick, and it really reflects how old he is. The horror in this movie comes more from, you know, the creepiness of the connection between Count Orlok and Ellen, her nightmares, the visions that she has, and the way that she's almost possessed by Count Orlok and he has control over her body even though they are miles apart. Of course there are kills, there is blood in the movie, and I really enjoyed it. I think the point of the movie was not to scare you, but to tell the story in a slightly different way from the way that we have seen done before. However, this movie has a very slow pacing. It is very slow. It's a movie that you have to be ready to get immersed into slowly and be there for the ride and just accept the journey. And I don't think it's going to be for everybody. I think we live in a society where we currently want things fast. We are looking for a quick gratification, and that's why we love horror movies that in the first 5 minutes there's already action things happening, like a lot of things happening. And Robert Eggers' vision is just very different. He's giving you a movie that, like I said, it's a movie that could have easily been done 100 years ago. That's what it looks like. And those movies tended to be more about the story and the characters than just quick special effects and gratification and quick action-packed scenes, especially when it comes to horror and Gothic horror. In my opinion, if you have seen the other Robert Eggers films, this one is closer to The Lighthouse when it comes to the looks, to the descent into madness and all of that. So if you enjoyed The Lighthouse, you might actually really have a good time with Nosferatu. After watching this movie, I also ended up sure that I think Robert Eggers would be an amazing director for a movie about possession and exorcism. So I hope that that is on his calendar in some point in the future. I think this version of Nosferatu is a mix between the 1922 silent film, the book, but also the 1932 adaptation with Bela Lugosi, and you can also see a little bit of the influence that Francis Ford Coppola had with his Dracula portrayal, which was a little bit more of a sci-fi fantasy. You know, he went a little bit more bonkers. His version is probably the more detached from the book, but it's the 90s version, the one that most people remember. In the end, I gave this movie a 4.5 out of 5, but I think I'm gonna be in the minority. I think for a lot of moviegoers, this movie is going to be boring because it's very slow, but after watching the other ones, I was already expecting that pacing, and I think that Robert Eggers respected the pacing from the originals and gave the characters the time that they needed. And the Nosferatu that you get here is a mix between, you know, the original Count Orlok from 1922, but also the Dracula we got from Coppola that was more sexy, more obsessed with his love and craving Ellen, and that is exactly the mix that you're gonna get here. In my opinion, this is one of the best Gothic horror movies made in the last decade. I love the way it looks. I love the work with the shadows and the light, and also the way that he decided to do Nosferatu, the way that he looks. I felt like it was one of the most human-like portrayals of this character, and it was definitely unsettling, and he did look rotten. I think if you enjoy Robert Eggers' vision, aesthetics, you might enjoy the movie. If you love the original from 1922 and 1979, this might also be for you. If you're somebody that needs more action and you like your vampire movies to be a bit more dynamic and with a faster pacing, then you're probably gonna get bored with this. So in my opinion, I would of course recommend people to go and watch it because I really enjoyed it. But I think from the 4 Robert Eggers movies, his more commercial film, the one that it's more for all publics, I would say it's still for me The Northman. And the other 3, it depends on the type of viewer. Alright you guys, I hope that you enjoyed the spoiler-free review of Nosferatu 2024. Let me know down below if you have enjoyed the character of Nosferatu, if you've seen the older movies, if you've never seen them before. And let me know down below which is one of your favorite vampire movies ever made. Doesn't matter which one it is. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!